This video is for Season 3, Episode 5 of Shield Hero versus Book 11 still. This is going to be a pretty short one because half the episode was a fight. So obviously when that happens, there's just not that much to talk about unless they skip a lot. So the first thing that I'm going to pick up on is where we left off with Chapter 11. And what we find out is that Keel can actually transform now into like a husky. And transformations for the demi-humans are essentially a power-up. So nothing huge, but just more stuff that we get from the side characters that obviously wasn't able to fit into the show. There's also a quick little thing in here about how Rishia has been training with the old Hengen Muso lady in all of her spare time, and that their trip to the other world really sped up her development. So she's gradually getting stronger, even though it's not really a focus of the show or book. And they went through this pretty fast in the show too, where the slaves are starting to get their class up, and now Fumi's letting them pick what they want. And you see the Lumos go to become crafters or blacksmiths and that sort of thing. So, you just get a little bit more detail on all the different slaves and some of the side characters and that type of thing that wasn't able to make it into the show. And then there's some comedy that was skipped that I just kind of glossed over here, actually, where now Fumi's thinking of if Raftalia could transform and how cute she'd be, and nicknames for Foal and stuff like that he does just constantly throughout the book. And they did the class ups where Philo is in the room for people who want Naofumi to choose or who don't want to choose themselves. And then he tells her to go outside because her little cowlick sends a feather into the dragon hourglass, like really powers up people, but it also picks what their class up is. And there had been about 50-50 between the slaves of if they wanted to choose themselves or not. When they go visit the armor like they did in the show, you get some little details here about why the spirit tortoise material is hard to work with. And the blacksmith explains that the material doesn't respond to the air wake processing, which essentially makes stuff that would be heavy a lot lighter. There's just some nice little details in here, nothing major. This is where we get the fight, where the two guys show up and ambush Naofumi and his group. And the only real difference is that in the anime, it's just Raftalia, Philo, and Naofumi. And in the book, he has a bunch of slaves with him, so he has to protect them while they're fighting these guys. But overall, they did a pretty good job. And this is obviously where you find out a lot more about Sign and what her deal is. Even though Naofumi still refers to her as Murder Piero in his head the whole time, at least for this fight. And something that might not have been clear is when they end up winning here, Naofumi says he sees like a little bit of light fading from their body, and they didn't really explain it. But essentially what you're seeing is that they have control over their soul. Like throughout the series, you've probably seen the Soul Eater shield, which affected Glass, who is the spirit. And they have attacks like Life Force, which negate all of Naofumi's magic and defenses. So this is kind of an extension of that. And hopefully it'll get explained in more detail later on, but just in case you were confused at this point in the show. And this is also where you find out why Sign's speech is so weird. And it's because her world was destroyed. And because she's a vassal weapon wielder of her world, it's like disconnected, so it's not fueled, essentially, for her to have all her speech translated and in constant communication and that sort of thing. And we get a pretty detailed conversation here about Eclair and Rishia and their training. And essentially, Eclair can only learn the Hengen Muso style at a base level, but it would still help her in battle because she's already pretty strong. And Rishia is on her way to becoming able to wield it like she did against Kyo all the time. And then we find out that Raftalia kind of innately uses it, but if she trains more, she can enhance her skills. So it'd be worth it for her to train. She's just always busy out with Naofumi taking care of whatever, obviously. You also got a glance at this in the anime where Atla touches Foal in the chest with her finger and he goes down immediately. And Naofumi's kind of surprised because he's like, oh, why is she the stronger one now when she could barely walk when she got here? And here's just the art of that scene because you can see how well she uses the ability because it's just natural to her. And Eclair explains to Naofumi that there's pretty much nothing that she can learn from it because being blind increased her aptitude for it so much. So she's pretty much just practicing her skills and training. And we get some more fun little interactions here that they just don't have time for, where Naofumi's giving Eclair a hard time for not running her territory properly and kind of putting it all off on Melty. And Eclair asks Naofumi what's wrong with him because he gets like an evil look when he finds out they're going to hunt bandits because he enjoys it. When Rapchan comes along and Naofumi's petting her, Raftalia sighs because she's like kind of jealous, obviously. And Eclair tells her not to give up. And then this is where you find out that we don't know yet, but Ren is the one running the bandits. And their strategy is to have the bandits divide up their targets, and then he picks them off one by one. So Naofumi's a little bit confused by this. And they also do a little bit of monster hunting along the way. And you can see Rishia take the lead and kind of just kick a bunch of ass on the monsters, which is nice. And you find out that Rishia likes to use a little sword, like a rapier or something, and then she throws throwing knives. And she's really good at throwing stuff and hitting targets, which comes up way later in the story. And you get to see Eclair's a little bit stronger, and Atla kills a monster, and she just does it with like a single finger and stops this magic razorback in its tracks and then just kills it. It's almost like an assassination technique is how Naofumi describes it. And also throughout this book, we see that Rishia's stats haven't really changed at all. Like she leveled up to 69 super fast, but her stats were always terrible. And then when she went from 70 to 71 while they're hunting monsters in this chapter, her stats went way up. And then she goes from 71 to 72 and they go up like another 30% is what Naofumi estimates. And he says that her stats are about half of what Raphtalia's were before being chosen by a vassal weapon. So she went from like a third of Raphtalia's strength to a half in 2 levels. So it seems like she was almost like stopped up. And then once she started using the Hengen Muso style, now that she's leveling up, it's taking longer. And then her stats are going way up. And this is about where the episode ends. Except in the episode, you see Naofumi run into Motoyasu and Ren. And in this, it's just Naofumi and Ren. So we get some conversation here between Eclair and Naofumi and them kind of going back and forth because Naofumi always likes to steal the loot from the bandits. And Eclair's like, you should return it. And Naofumi's like, to who? We have no idea whose it is. So there's a little bit of that in there and they go back and forth. So they divide up just like they did in the show. But instead of Naofumi running into Motoyasu with Ren, Naofumi sees a shadow coming and reflexively puts his shield up. And then we hear Ren yell, assassinating sword. And Naofumi says it was a pretty powerful attack. And then this is where we see Naofumi realize that it's Ren that he's fighting. And it's obviously a cursed weapon. And here's the art style, which you can see matches the show pretty well. And I'm going to stop here for this one because their whole fight is the next episode. So there's no point in me going through this chapter because this chapter covers a lot of the fight. That's episode 5. At this point, we're about 2/3 of the way through the book. So I'm curious to see where they start cutting out chunks again, assuming that they're going to cover 2 more books from episodes 7 to 12. So that's it for me for this one. I'll try to catch up hopefully this week with episodes 6 and 7, but it's also almost Thanksgiving, so, you know. Anyway, like and subscribe and shit. Thanks. See ya.